Hey gang, Scott here. Well, Adobe, they overhauled masking in Lightroom Classic in a big way. And I want to walk through some of these changes that have been introduced into the masking tools. There are a lot of other videos out there that will go through the mechanics of, this is where the sliders are, this is where the new buttons are, and so forth. I want to work through an example and show you how I'm using the new masking tools, how these things intersect and interact. And intersect, that's a word that's going to come up here that's kind of important. It's a cool thing. But I thought we'll walk through an example, and I'll use this photo here. It's almost Halloween. And this is an appropriate photo, and it's going to let us look at all of the different characteristics of these new masking tools. Now, the very first thing you'll notice is there aren't multiple tools in the masking area anymore. We just have a single masking icon. We click that, and we have a whole bunch of options now. There are the same ones we've had for a long time. We have brush, we have linear and radial gradients, we can do our color and luminance range masks. Those are kind of separated out now, so they're not like bundled in or tucked in underneath a gradient or a radial. You can just start using them. We also have some AI-powered selection tools. These are kind of like borrowed from Photoshop. They brought them into Lightroom. And so what we're going to do with this photo is try out all these different things. We're going to do the sky, we're going to do subject. I'll show you the classics with the radials and the linears, but also how they can intersect with color ranges and luminance range masks. And for this photo, the few things we're going to target. We're going to do something to the sky. The sky is really boring in this. We'll just do something so you can see how the tools work. We're going to do some subject work, the scarecrow, and do some color work on the greens, and then some targeted things to the wagon, and that'll let us use all of these tools. So let us start with select sky. Now I click this. A couple of things happen. First, you notice this new little box that popped up. I'm not sure why it collapsed on me. Normally it pops out and looks like this. You get this masking panel, and this is where all of your masks are controlled. It is, I like it. It's much more convenient. You can really see these are the different masks I have on my photo, and as you're adding more and more localized adjustments, this panel makes it much simpler to find what you're looking for. You're not hunting for individual pins where, did I make that change in a radial or a gradient? I can go into my list of masks here, and of course you can name them if you so desire. Double clicking on them, you can name them, and you can expand and contract them. But automatically, of course, this detected the sky. It found the sky. I have all of these sliders here apply to this mask auto-created. Add the show overlay, turn it off and on. Minor little feature, which is actually a major feature. You can change the color of the overlay for a custom color. I like to use magenta for a lot of them because, like a strong magenta, if I push this far, this is not a color that occurs in nature very naturally. So it's a good overlay for your photos. It's very easy to tell where our mask is. They did a great job in the sky. So now let's do some changes here, right? So now let's just do a couple little token changes so we can see something happening. I'll cool the sky down a little bit, bring the exposure down a little bit. So all right, we've got a sky out there, right? The key thing is the masking. Hit select sky, go find it for me, and it did. Let's create a new mask. We'll create another mask, and I get that same pop-up. So I'm still in my masking area. I have all these options. I want to select the sky again. We'll go off, figure out the sky, select it, and then I can invert that. Right? Invert. Now I'm targeting everything else in the photo. So you have inversion for all of these things as well. And here, let's turn off the overlay. Maybe we'll add a little bit of clarity. Let's push it up a little far so you can see something happening there in just all of the foreground. Great. So that's two things there. You can also see we have these masks. And if let's keep track of things. We'll double click. This was the sky, all right? This was the foreground. And if you noticed when I dragged over the mask, if I hover over the mask or over a pin, it will automatically show me that overlay. So if you want to get a quick look, what's that mask? Okay, that's what my foreground is. Let's do a third one. Let's try a color range this time. We'll target the greens, create a mask, and this time I'll choose color range. I get my picker, and let's pick something that's green. I'll start with the grass down here. All right. I'm hovering over the pin. The overlay is showing me things there. There is all of the things it thinks are green. we have our refinement. We can have less of that green or more of that green. I think I'll pull that back and make it a little bit less. And now I can do the adjustments here. If I take my hue and start pushing this to the right, I'll push it very far. We can see those greens really get popped. We'll pull that back a little bit so it's something a little more natural. A couple of clicks and I have the color range mask for the entire photo. It's in my masking panel. We'll double click on that and call it the greens. Okay. How about we work on a luminance range mask? Let's work on the wagon and get some extra texture in the wagon itself. So we'll create a new mask and we'll use a luminance range mask because this will target really the tones we select, but we can target shadows or highlights. Out here I'll just click and I'll drag a little box. I like to select multiple tones with my luminance range mask. Okay, there we go. We got the selection automatically. Now, luminance range. If you recall from the older Lightroom masking tools, you had the endpoint, so you could set the black and white point, and then you had to smoothen the slider to say how gradual or how crisp you want that cutoff to be, that fade off. The interface is a little bit different now, but the principles are the same. So let me click on Show Luminance. So now we're seeing that luminance range, and we're seeing it in red, right? So this inner box, this is really the range. I can make that range tighter, and we'll see less and less, so I'm only looking at the really deep shadows. These pins on the other ends, these are our smoothness. So I take that and make it very crisp or very faded. And now I can take this range, I can position the range wherever I want. Let's make this a very, very tight, narrow band. And you can see, I can have just my shadows affected. I can start rolling all the way through my midtones, up into the highlights. We'll eventually start bleeding up into the sky. So this is how this tool works. We set the range with like this rectangular box, and then you set the smoothness, and you have individual controls. The smoothness can be more gradual on the highlights and or on the shadows, and they do not need to be the same. So it's a very nice, powerful change to the interface. Looks a little weird when you work with it, but this is how it's operating. Now, I said I wanted to work on the wagon, right? So around here is kind of, I'm getting into that wagon there. Let's make sure I can pick up some of those midtones in the wagon. I'll stretch that out a little bit more. I'm working by looking at the photo. I'm watching the wagon. All right, the wagon looks pretty well covered. Now, of course, I've got a bunch of other extraneous stuff. I mentioned that word intersect. Now, this is a buried thing, but it's cool. Here's my luminance range. Here's my mask. If I click on the dots, I can intersect this mask that I have with something else, and I will use a radial gradient. So now I drag that gradient, and that same luminance range mask is still working for me, right? You can see that as I'm stretching this out, I'm getting just this magenta area that I set up, which is my wagon. That's where I want this to be targeted. And so I can just shape this around here, do something like that. Cool. Let's turn off the overlay. And so we can really see what's happening. Let me push exposure around. You're seeing that wagon is what's really getting popped, right? There's a little bleed here and there, but for my purposes, which will be to add texture and add clarity, that wagon is going to get a very nice pop. Before that change, after that change. So intersect lets you take a mask that might be affecting a broad area of your photo and tighten it into a localized area. And you can intersect using a radial. It's like my preferred method. You can use gradients. You can use the brush. Now, the last thing we have not looked at yet is subject. And this one, I was curious to see how this was going to work on this photo. Select subject. What is the AI going to do? And it went around and it looked at it and said, pretty close. It found the scarecrow. It found these wagon wheels too. So the AI is doing a couple of things that are interesting, but it found what is primarily my subject. Great. Let me show you one other feature. We have these add and subtract buttons. These let us add or subtract from the mask. In this case, I want to subtract, and I will just use a brush to subtract. So here's my brush, and now I'll start painting away the areas that I don't care about for my subject. And I'll be kind of, quick and sloppy here for the masking, because this is not so much about Scott's brushing skills. It's about showing you these new masking tools. And I can get rid of that wagon wheel. I can get rid of this wagon wheel. This is one of those where I could have done an intersection with an elliptical to just get the scarecrow and then use a brush to do some really fine-tuned cleanup. Okay. And how about we just increase the exposure of our subject a little bit, maybe a touch of texture. And we're basically finished with this photo. I didn't name my other two masks, but to be consistent, we'll call that the wagon. And we'll call this the scarecrow. And then we are finished. But this entire set of masks here, all manageable. And you can see what happened, right? The sky. See what it did with the sky, with the foreground, the greens, the wagon, and then the scarecrow itself. And at any time, if you need to make adjustments, like those greens look a little bit too green, pick greens. These are the sliders. I can back that off, make that a little more tame. The foreground, notice the sliders now match my selected mask. I can make adjustments there. Maybe I want a little more clarity, and so on down the line. So this new masking experience in Lightroom, it's really slick and it's very powerful. It will take you a little bit of getting used to, especially if you're used to the older classic school with Luminance range masks and so forth. But I really do like the newer interface. There are some nice improvements. The intersections are very nice. The fact that you can just visualize and see all of your different masks in a panel as opposed to being in pins and scattered across brushes and radials and gradients. Everything is in one place. It's really, really nice, especially that new interface on the Luminance range mask. That is a nice treat. Individual fades to the shadows and to the highlights. This is all really cool stuff, and it really can take your masking to the next level right in Lightroom without having to bounce out to another application. I hope you found this video useful. Play with the tools, get used to them. There's a lot of power here. You got questions, go ahead and drop them below. You got ideas about how you're using them, share those as well. We can all get better with the tools together. And until next time, my name's Scott Davenport. Have fun.